Welcome to MJA Inc. Investigations Podcast, Episode 9, Part 1, the series Cases State by State. As of June 1st, 2017, MJA has been open and operating for 16 years. We have shared a lot of success and gaining new relationships to help MJA with our work. MJA Inc. Investigations' three founding partners would like to thank our staff for all their hard work and dedication to our cause. We would also like to give a special thanks to Patty Bishop, our very first client, for helping MJA to grow through the years. MJA wants to thank all of our clients who trusted in us to work on their loved one's case. We would like to thank Together We Stand and the podcasters Tim and Lance for all their help in keeping some of our cases in the public eye. We would like to thank our law enforcement and media contacts and our sources who provided information. MJA at this time are working 90 cases covering 12 states. In 2017, we hope to add 3 new cases to our case file. We would like to thank the people who visit our website and other websites where we post our work on. In 16 years, over 1 million people have read what we have posted. MJA would like to remind people that our website is active to the public. You can join our website, you can blog or post cases as a member or as a guest. Thanks everyone for a very productive year. On the average, 90,000 people are missing in the USA at any given time, according to Todd Matthews from the National Missing and Identified Persons System, or NamUs, a national database for missing people. The first 24 hours are the most crucial in an active missing persons investigation. Amy Dodds, an investigator with the Knox County Sheriff's Office, told US Today Network. The longer it takes for a case to be reported and become active investigation, the less likely a positive outcome will occur. For children, the first 3 hours are especially crucial because 76% of abducted children are killed and die within that time frame. Welcome back to our MJA podcast, Episode 9, Part 1, the series Cases State by State. Case 1 from the Doe Network. 14-year-old white female Amanda Dawn Gallion vanished on October 13, 1997 from Gillette, Wyoming, located in Campbell County. Gallion's father reported to Wyoming law enforcement on October 13, 1997, that Amanda had left for school that morning and didn't return. Wyoming police assumed Gallion ran away from home with her 20-year-old boyfriend. She had ran away from home 2 weeks before that, returning the next day. Her boyfriend told police 3 days later that he last seen her at 7:15 the morning she vanished. At the time, police suspected he was hiding her. A few days later, his car was found on the other side of the road, facing the wrong direction. He was never seen again. Gallion and her boyfriend never have used their Social Security numbers, which would have been active had either gotten jobs, credit cards, or driver's licenses. Case 2 from the Doe Network. 26-year-old white female Anita Maria Price went missing on May 30th, 1974 from Moundsville, West Virginia, located in Marshall County. Price was last seen around 8:45 p.m. when she left to go to work at the Flamingo Club in Benwood, West Virginia on May 30th, 1974. She never arrived at work and was never seen again. The vehicle she was driving belonged to her boyfriend and was described as an early 1970s AMC Sportabout, a four-door Gremlin, green in color. The vehicle was discovered the next morning setting along West Virginia Route 2, which is a major north and south route along the Ohio River between Moundsville and Wheeling, West Virginia. There was no evidence of a struggle, although some cosmetics, including lipstick and eyeliner, was laying on the seat of the car. Anita's disappearance wasn't reported to police for 3 days. Anita had been going through a divorce, and there was a custody battle for her two children. Authorities believe her disappearance is connected to foul play in some manner. Case 3 from the Doe Network. Missing 28-year-old white female Marsha Lynn Joyce. Marsha Lynn Joyce went missing on August 30th, 1978 from Bellingham, Whatcom County, Washington. Marsha Joyce was last seen on the morning of August 30th, 1978 at her home on Everson Goshen Road in Bellingham, Washington. She was at home with her two children and was last seen hanging laundry in the backyard of her home. When her son went outside to find her, she was gone and was never seen again. Joyce's husband drove into Bellingham that morning to make a withdrawal from the family's bank account, leaving his family to tend to their two young children. In Bellingham, her husband went to make his withdrawal and discovered that someone had cleared out the account. The withdrawal was likely made a couple of days before Joyce disappeared. Joyce's husband called the sheriff's office to report his wife's disappearance after returning home. He was told to call back 24 hours later and make a missing persons report. Deputies combed the area in search of any trace of Joyce but found nothing. Joyce's disappearance is considered a potential unsolved homicide due to the unusual nature of her disappearance. Someone also could have abducted her, or she could have abandoned the family. Case 4 from the Doe Network. 32-year-old white male, Christopher Michael Gerald, went missing on June 25, 1993, and was last seen in Brattleboro and the Ludlow, Windham County, Vermont area. Christopher Michael Gerald was last seen in Brattleboro or Ludlow on June 25, 1993. Two suspicious-looking men were taking some things out of his residence. Most of his personal belongings was left behind. Missing were some expensive Native American collectibles and other expensive items such as stereo equipment and etc. His 19 '82 white Mazda sedan is also missing. His Harley-Davidson motorcycle and Ford pickup were located at a repair shop in Hinsdale, New Hampshire. Case 5 from the Doe Network. 27-year-old white female Iris Leslie Brown went missing on March 15, 1976 from Burlington, Vermont. Iris Brown was last seen leaving her apartment in Burlington on March 1976 with William Posey. Posey had recently been released from a federal penitentiary in Danbury, Connecticut, where Brown's boyfriend, Martin Gold, was also incarcerated. After Posey told Iris that Gold was being released early and needed a ride, Iris agreed to go with Posey and left with him later that same day. William Posey was convicted of the kidnapping of Iris in 1981, but not murder, since Brown's body has not been found and he was sentenced to life in prison. Although blood believed to be Iris's was found in Posey's car after her disappearance, police had no proof of what happened to her or where her body might be. Posey confessed to the killing in April 2008. Posey was initially claimed to have driven Brown to Springfield, Massachusetts. Now he maintains he never left Vermont and may not have driven much beyond Barry, the last place he was last seen the night Brown disappeared. Case 6 from the Doe Network. 25-year-old white female Cherie L. Warren went missing on October 2nd, 1985 from Salt Lake City, Utah. Warren, a mother, was last seen about 6:30 p.m. on October 2nd, 1985 as she was leaving work at the Utah State Employees Credit Union in Salt Lake City. Warren lived with her parents in Roy at the time of her disappearance, and at the time she was dating Ogden serial rapist Gary Hartman. On November 11, 1985, Warren's vehicle was recovered in the Aladdin Hotel parking lot in Las Vegas, Nevada. The vehicle appeared to have been parked for some time. Hartman went to prison in 1987, where he still resides. Evidence was never tied to him and to Warren's disappearance. Case 7 from the Doe Network. 17-year-old white female Deborah Lee Frost went missing on July 9, 1984 from Salt Lake City, Salt Lake County, Utah. Frost was last seen at approximately 2200 hours at the Mountain Bell Plaza in Salt Lake City, Utah on July 7, 1984. She told her boyfriend, who worked at the plaza, that she was going to hitchhike home on Montgomery Street, but she never arrived. It is not known if she located a ride or began walking on her own. Investigators believe she was abducted. Case 8 from the Doe Network. 20-year-old black female Alice Mae Sullivan went missing on August 26, 1986 from Nashville, Davison County, Tennessee. Sullivan was a student at Tennessee State University in 1986. She moved to Nashville from Gatlin, Tennessee, and was living in Town Terrace apartments with her young son at the time of her disappearance. She was last seen leaving her home on August 28th of that year at approximately 8 o'clock p.m. when her boyfriend arrived to take her, no, 8 o'clock a.m. when her boyfriend arrived to take her to school. It is known that Sullivan attended class in the morning hours. She was last seen in a girlfriend's dormitory room in Hankel Hall at approximately 10 a.m. Her friends told investigators that Sullivan was alone in her room when she left for her own classes. Sullivan was scheduled to return home at 1300 hours that day. She never arrived and has not been seen since. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance. Case 9 from the Doe Network. 28-year-old white female, Heller Sample, vanished on February 1st, 1983 from Cleveland, Bradley County, Tennessee. The oldest active missing person cases in Bradley County Sheriff's Office files has gone unsolved for over 27 years. Heller Sample was last seen at her residence on Peach Orchard Hill Road in February of 1983. Sample is described as a white female with brown hair, approximately 5 feet tall, weighing around 105 pounds. At the time she was last seen, Sample was 28 years old and had a daughter who was 2 years old. Heller Sample was born in February 1955. Case 10 from the Doe Network. 34-year-old white female, Elizabeth Nicola Crawford, vanished on July 19, 1986 from Simpsonville, Greenville County, South Carolina. On the evening of July 16, 1986, Elizabeth Crawford received a telephone call at her home at 108 Cherrywood Mobile Home Park in Simpsonville, South Carolina. After receiving this phone call, Miss Crawford told her son she was going to a friend's house and would be back soon. Miss Crawford never arrived at the friend's house. This was at 22:30 hours, and she has not been seen since. The Simpsonville Police Department have witnesses who stated they had saw Crawford 2 days after the disappearance in the company of a white male outside of Ingalls in Simpsonville. On July 19, 1986, Crawford's 1978 Chevrolet Malibu two-door was found abandoned in the Fountain Inn on Georgia Street in front of the Wilson Sporting Goods, 5 miles from her home. Case 11 from the Doe Network. 27-year-old white female, Katrina McVeigh, went missing on June 17, 1992 from Woonsocket, Providence County, Rhode Island. Christina, a mother of 3, was last known address was 295 2nd Avenue, was last seen getting into a car near Front and Lincoln Street. Family members have never heard from her again. Her family believes she was killed by someone close to her and buried for a time on the banks of the Blackstone River in the city. Her brother had searched an area on the riverbank and found what he believed was some clothing that Katrina had been wearing the night she went missing. According to her family, Katrina's alleged murder came at the end of a long-standing abusive relationship that first cost Katrina her home, custody of her 3 children, and then her life. Case 12 from the Doe Network. 29-year-old white female, Barbara Johnson Willard, vanished on June 17, 1996, from Jay, Oklahoma, located in Delaware County. Willard was last seen at her home in Jay, Oklahoma on June 17, 1996. After an extensive search for her, the family went to local law enforcement to seek help. 10 days later, her vehicle was found abandoned in a pond near Calcord, Oklahoma. Upon further investigation, pieces of clothing were found hanging out of the trunk and the gas tank. The car had been saturated in transmission fluid, and as if the culprits intended to burn the vehicle. Blood and tissue samples found in the trunk were a match for the DNA of Miss Willard. Update: in 2011, a man was charged with Willard's death. Her remains have not been located. At the time of her disappearance, she was 29 years old and had 2 young daughters. The case file kept by local law enforcement has been lost over the years. Let's take a pause for the cause, and when we return on the podcast, tonight's guest is Dan, who is a profiler and researcher for our group. We'll be back in a moment with Dan's interview. I would like to apologize to our listeners for I made mistakes on scheduling guests for certain episodes. Cali will take Dan's place on episode 9, part 1, and Dan will return on episode 11. And the reason being, episode 11 is about Indiana unsolved homicide cases, and Dan is from Indiana and knows some of the cases very well, better than our profiler and researcher Cali out in California. Thank you for your patience, and stay tuned to Cali's interview. Back in a moment with Miss Cali. Welcome, Cali, to our MJ podcast, episode 9, part 1, the series, Cases State by State. How are you tonight, Miss Cali?
I'm fine, Mark, and you?
I'm just fine, and this is a very unusual statistical case on these cases state by state. And you'll realize that once I start reading this. On the average, 90,000 people are missing in the United States at any given time, according to Todd Matthews from the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, or NamUs, a national database for missing people. While growing up, Cali, did you ever think that the missing was treated as second-class citizens?
Well, sometimes, yes, Mark. Unfortunately, there's a gap between what the police can see and what they cannot see, or perhaps their training would refuse them from seeing. It's what happens in that gap that can seriously harm the outcome of solving a missing persons case. Sometimes it is the lifestyle of the missing that leaves the police with an assumption, which is where the second-class citizen of the missing comes into play. The respect of human life, all human life, should be first and foremost primary.
And have you ever came across a detective that was going through the motions instead of trying to solve the case?
Well, I'm going to refer to one that before it could even be started to be investigated. I've come across several persons who have not been doing their job as I saw it on a case. The first one was a police commissioner who refused to move on a missing persons case of a young woman missing out of character. It was day 2 of her being reported missing to the local law enforcement. Family was frantic for answers to find their daughter and their sister, whom had vanished. The police said that they were unable to step in and investigate aside from the initial trip to the woman's house, and did an unprofessional view of a walkthrough of an empty home, well, empty as no one was there, on day 1. Unless they had approval from the police commissioner, their hands were tied for the 72-hour missing adult rule of thumb. Family was surrounded by friends and more family, and they started their own search efforts for their missing sibling, and did all of this, unfortunately, from her home as the central command post. So that scene was totally polluted as far as being a crime scene. I am a friend of that family, and upon hearing this echoed by 2 of my other friends as well, I stepped in and I used my public relations skills to enhance that possibility of moving it along. From her home and her telephone, with permission of her brothers, I made a call to one of the news editors of the nearby city newspaper, explaining to him the situation and asking for a favor in that of a phone call to the local and state police, inquiring about what was being done and what was not being done in the case of this missing young woman, and why it was not being done. Also, the police commissioner. Now, the news people apparently made the call. People at the scene of the missing woman's front lawn, who were hunters and searchers, had police scanner radios in their trucks, and word of the call from the news media was flooding those radio waves right out front. And the word was out that the police commissioner was on his way to her house for a showdown with her brothers. He bounced into place on the front lawn, just as I anticipated, and started pointing fingers and into the chest of the missing woman's brother, screaming at him on his way, and all the while that there was no need for the pushing the issue as he saw it. I stepped in between the 2 men and directly and told him that I had indeed made the phone call to the media and would not hesitate to do it again. The reason that this was done was because he was not doing his job. And until his job was done, and done correctly, we would not let it rest. And the missing persons investigation needed to become real, and become real now. And at that point in time, he turned on his heel, fuming, and within half an hour, a missing persons investigation began. I have also seen law enforcement who made light of some findings based on where it was found. Oh, that's just Lover's Lane. It could be from anybody.
Yeah.
So instead of taking the DNA of that victim and checking it out against that evidence, it was totally discounted and never looked at.
And let's say you had a missing loved one. What kind of detective would you want to work on the case?
Well, I'd want one with a wide open mind who does not make assumptions or judgments about the victim. One who sets many nets, not just one, and has command over all those who are acting under him or her. One who is willing to call in or call upon higher powers to get answers, like the FBI, instead of smothering the case because of whatever reason, be it, but mostly personal ego or whatever.
Okay. Just using common sense, why do you think people always blames the victim like the victim's done something wrong to deserve what happened to them?
Well, they're being judgmental, and it's also convenient for them. But that judgmentalness, they're keeping from having to look at their own humanity and all the elements thereof. People like to think that all is fine as long as it's not affecting their own world or that their own person. Joe is bad and I'm good. But what they don't realize is that when they're pointing a finger at one person, there's three more pointing back at them.
Yeah. In your eyes, is the most dangerous person you know in your life, are they better than trusting a stranger?
Wow, what a question. A very good one. Mark, that would require a great deal of conditioning and possibly a child out of an abusive childhood to go on trusting a dangerous person in your life. You would do that trusting out of fear of the unknown. Also fear of what this dangerous person you know would do only to yourself, not only to yourself, but to your loved ones. As many have quoted before, including Franklin D. Roosevelt, we have nothing to fear but fear itself.
And once again, I would like to read a quote. Though nobody can go back and make a new beginning, anyone can start over and make a new ending. Chico Xavier. Thank you, Cali, for being on the podcast tonight. We look forward to speaking with you again. And thanks to all of our listeners. My name is Mark Harper, and good night from Plattsburgh, New York.